The views and opinions of this broadcast do not reflect the views and opinions of Armed Media, New Productions, and its affiliates. Enjoy the show.
Hey guys, thanks for tuning in. This is Two Beards Talking. My name is Daniel Sanders, and joining me tonight, I'm proud to have him back with me, my special guest, Rod Burks. Rod, say hi to the folks out there.
Hey folks, how you doing?
As always, we want to give a big shout out to the troops out there serving overseas. Y'all guys are doing a great job. Keep up good work. Come home safe. Everybody's here rooting for you. So, got some personal news to share with everybody real quick. Matt, unfortunately, will no longer be a part of the show. He has moved on to bigger and better things, and we definitely wish him all the best of luck with everything. Now, for tonight's show, no politics, no crybaby of the week. This is a kind of a touchy thing for me. It really kind of struck a chord with me when I found out about this. So back on March the 1st, a film documentary was released called Combat Obscura, and it really shows the true natures of war in and of itself. Specifically the war going on in Afghanistan. The director of the film, Miles Lagos, is a former Marine combat cameraman who was assigned to 1st Battalion, 6th Marines during their 2011 deployment in Helmand Province, Afghanistan. Now, Rod, you and I have both seen the video, and it's a very, very intense film to watch, especially if you've been in that boat.
Agreed. Yeah, absolutely. There are definitely some scenes that stood out that were very difficult to watch. But it was, I think, most importantly, if for anybody that's been there, they'll understand this. It tells the truth. Yes. And typically the truth is the first casualty of war.
Right.
So to see something that portrays, and I'm not condoning, I'm not criticizing, I'm just describing. But to see something that doesn't have a narrative, that doesn't have an agenda, it's refreshing, especially when it comes to America's longest running war.
Right. And, you know, just a quick statistic, since you brought that up, I actually saw something the other day that said there are kids that are signing up now to fight in this war who their fathers were deployed overseas during this war. This is the first time in American history where we have been involved in a conflict that is so long that fathers and sons are fighting in the exact same war.
Yeah, and that in my mind is a failure.
Yes, it truly is. Now, the reason why this film Combat Obscura is making such big waves isn't because, well, I won't say it isn't solely because it depicts the true horrors and nature of war. It also depicts some Marines partaking in criminal behavior. Now, I reached out to the Public Affairs Office at Headquarters Marine Corps, and they issued me their official statement giving their position on the film. And this is coming from Captain Christopher Harrison. He's the Communication Strategy and Operations Officer Communication Directorate at Headquarters Marine Corps at the Pentagon. And it reads, "The behavior and actions depicted in this film do not live up to the high standards we expect of our Marines and do not represent the experience or attitudes of the vast majority of Marines who deployed and served with honor and distinction in Afghanistan. We place a tremendous amount of emphasis on ensuring individual Marines are both physically and mentally ready for the challenges they may face in combat. Marines are provided extensive personal and professional training as well as access to multiple resources to prepare and safeguard them for the uncertainty of battle. The actions depicted in the film of these few betrayed the trust and safety of their fellow Marines. They selfishly put their own self-interest over their unit, and by doing so, put their entire team at risk." It goes on, but I'm going to stop right there. So, the criminal action that I'm sorry, go ahead, Rod.
No. I just have an opinion about that, and it is my own opinion, and not that of the Marine Corps, the Department of Defense, or anybody else's. But if we put that shoe on the other foot for just a second, and we were to ask the same people who wrote that letter to you, what is our mission in Afghanistan? I think they would have just as much difficulty giving us a clear answer as they did with that statement. You know, I mean, what did we say? The Marines didn't live up to their expectation, or the expectation of the Marine Corps. I understand that, and I don't disagree. But at the same time, what is our political leadership? And I know you said this isn't a political show, but I mean, policy dictates what the military does. You know, they make it clear what the objectives are that you need to accomplish. What are we there to accomplish? And so the easy answer is what I was told: we're there to build a nation. That's not what you use militaries for. Militaries are not designed to build. We're designed to locate, close with, and destroy.
Right.
So, yeah, and the statement he gives, and I don't expect anything less. But it just kind of like, I don't know, it kind of grinds my gears a little bit.
Right. Now, the criminal activity, I'll go ahead and read this next short paragraph. "The potential criminal activity captured in the footage submitted for review is inexcusable and selfish and endangered the security of the Marines in that unit. The Naval Criminal Investigative Service conducted a preliminary investigation after viewing Mr. Lagoz's footage. Unfortunately, the statute of limitations for pursuing disciplinary action has passed. Additionally, the depiction of any DoD personnel or equipment in the film should not be misconstrued as a service endorsement of Mr. Lagoz's documentary." The criminal activity they're referring to is in the first 30 minutes of the film. It shows 3 different scenes of what appears to be Marines smoking hash. And I say appears to be because you see them walking through a hash field, and then in the very next scene, you see a group of them lying against a berm, and they're passing a cigarette back and forth in a manner that you would typically see with a joint. But you never actually see them dumping the tobacco out, packing it with hash. In another scene, Marine is using a Pringles can as a makeshift bong. And you don't actually see what he's smoking in this bong. And then in the next scene, shows a group of Marines in the same manner passing a cigarette back and forth with a group of Afghani nationals, interpreters, things like that. So you never actually see what they're smoking, but they're talking about it on film, and it's implied what they're smoking. And one of the Marines that was attached to the unit, another combat cameraman, was actually discharged after popping positive on a piss test for marijuana while he was in Kajaki, Afghanistan. So that is what really drew the Marine Corps and DoD's attention to this video. The criminal activity that was going on in the film. Now, as it does say in the statement here, the statute of limitations for disciplinary action has passed. This film was originally shot, the footage and everything was originally shot in 2011. We're 8 years down the road now. So the odds are every single one of those Marines that was involved in this could very well potentially be out of the Marine Corps already. So, yeah, there is no judicial proceedings to be had or anything like that against the Marines depicted in the film doing this stuff, but I can't help but wonder what happens when Lance Corporal Schmuckatelli is working for a drug task force agency somewhere in bumfuck Egypt, and the mayor finds out that he was in this video on camera smoking hash.
Well, let me present this question to you. This is personal experience. We guarded poppy fields in Afghanistan.
Mm-hmm.
We protected poppy fields from the Taliban in Afghanistan.
Right.
So if I were to go work for a drug task force and somebody said, "Wait, you were guarding poppy fields and now you're trying to bust the heroin dealer or the guy running whatever drugs through this county," I mean, you put the shoe on the other foot, and it's just as twisted as the example you just gave.
Right.
And so I question myself. I'm like, what am I doing here, guarding the poppies? Why aren't we here, cutting down, trying to eradicate drugs, trying to get ahead of the problem back home in the United States? And so I did my own research, and I decided to follow the money. The Department of Defense's budget is collected from corporate tax. So if the United States collects, I'm going to make up a number, $12 million or $12 trillion or whatever, $12 billion in corporate taxes, well, that's the DOD's budget. So who is the DOD beholden to? Well, obviously, whoever's paying for all of their equipment, right? I mean, that stands to reason. I mean, that makes sense. If this is the person paying for it, then that's who I am here to serve.
Right.
And what corporations care about poppies? What do you get from poppies? Of course, you get heroin, but you also get other drugs that are used medicinally for, like morphine. I'm not sure if it's the same stuff used in all of the opioids or like OxyContin and all that. I mean, I don't know the chemical makeup or if that's even where it's coming from. But my point is this: if Big Pharma cares so much about pharmaceuticals that they put American lives there to protect them, who are they then to say, no, you can't use this other plant to help take the edge off of combat? Because war is hell, right? I mean, war is war. There's nothing that compares.
Right. Now,
just
the only thing that I would say an argument to the scenario you gave, for some reason, the guy in the suit is telling the colonel to tell his guys, "Hey, go guard this poppy field. Don't worry." It's I'm sure you remember the poem "The Charge of the Light Brigade." There's not to reason why, there's but to do and die. We as the grunts on the field, we don't make the distinction of, hey, this is a poppy field and 90% of poppy is used for illicit drugs and so on and so forth. I don't know why I'm guarding it. I just know Colonel so-and-so said, guard this field. And if I tell Colonel so-and-so to, kick rocks, then no one's going to hear about Corporal Sanders. Hey, where'd Corporal Sanders go? Who's Corporal Sanders? Who's that? Yeah.
Right. Yeah, you do as you're told, and that's understood. But it's not wrong to seek information. It's not wrong to want to understand why. And part of the problem, I think, is that people have stopped asking why. Why is this the longest war the United States has ever been in? Well, like even the name of the movie, Combat Obscura. Obscura implies it's opaque. Nothing's transparent.
Right.
I know a lot of veterans, and we talk often, and we kind of ask, what was it all for? And the easy answer is it was for each other. But that's that's understood. That's self-evident. But really, what is the big picture?
Right.
I mean, are we really there? And I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm just saying that I have a hard time defending it, and I'll defend it till the day I die. But it's not as easy as the narrative would have you to believe, and that's why I like the film.
Right.
Because there is no narrative. It is the raw, unadulterated truth, and the truth will always reveal itself. And that's what we have with this film. And Marines are doing things that are illegal. Yeah, it happens. You don't even have to be in Afghanistan. Marines are doing things that are illegal. Aren't soldiers, sailors, airmen. They're doing things illegal. That doesn't characterize the entire service. This was just a snapshot. This is just one slice. In a layer of stuff going on in Afghanistan.
Now, I want to interject something right there. I'm sorry to cut you off, but I want to interject. So you said, it's not a representation, and I'm paraphrasing. It's not a representation of the Marine Corps as a whole. Mm-hmm. And while I understand what you're saying, and while I agree with you, I just you as well as I do that the general population doesn't see things that way. They see, they see a Marine on video, not a Hollywood film or anything like that, but an actual documentary type footage like what we have with this video. They see Marines overseas smoking illegal drugs, taking part in illegal activities, and they immediately go to, well, if they're doing it, and the rest of the Marine Corps is probably doing it. There were Army guys attached to this unit at some point during the deployment. Then it raises the question: well, if the Marine Corps is doing it and the Army's attached with them, does that mean the Army is doing it as well? That's just how the general population operates as a whole. The whole thing. One bad apple ruins the whole bunch.
Yeah, and you're right, and that's why that captain wrote the letter from PAO saying that this is the Marine Corps is supposed to represent the highest of military virtue.
Yes.
But let's consider who are these people? Who are Marines? Marines are Americans.
Right.
So if you take a slice of Americans, even those that do answer the call to serve their nation, you're going to get things that they're less than desirable. Does that mean that they don't have value, that they don't have worth? No, not at all. And until you walk a mile in their shoes, you can't criticize, you can't judge.
Right.
Did they participate in criminal activity? Yeah, absolutely, they did. I'm not arguing that. But I'd mentioned earlier, I deployed with 21 guys, and all 21 of us were there at the exact same time from the date we left the United States to the date we landed in Afghanistan. And all 21 of us will give you a different account of the exact same war. So the eyes of the beholder,
right.
It's going to be different.
Right. Now, getting away from the drugs and everything, there were other things that I saw in the video that I kind of had, just it just kind of hit me. I won't say that I had issue with it, but it really hit me kind of deep. Like, there was, I mean, there's footage in the video of them giving cigarettes to very, very young children. I'm not talking 12, 13 years old. I'm talking there was one child walking around puffing on a cigarette that was probably 4 years old. I realize it's a different culture over there, and they do things. Basically, by the time you're 8 years old over there, you're a man that can fight in combat. I realize.
And you're right. That did give me cause for concern, and I'm like, in my mind, I'm thinking, where are the parents at? But I think you hit the nail on the head. It's a different culture. I mean, we try to look at things through a lens of like the nuclear family, mom is mom, dad is dad, and like everybody contributes. There it's very different. The men are there for whatever. The children are just a like livestock. They're a product.
Yeah.
Either they contribute to the household value, or they can be traded. In the case of women or the girls, I've seen little girls that they were doing their bodily functions on the side of the road, as if they were an animal, and I'm just like, it's hard to digest whenever it's not normal for you, but for them, it's my wife called me once or I called her from Afghanistan, and she asked me what the time difference was, and I told her about 2,000 years. I mean,
you're not far off.
Yeah. I mean, it's biblical proportions. I mean, it's just not the same. And so when we look at it through our lens, something that is like, wow, that's terrible. But I mean, considering the life expectancy of an Afghan there, I think that the child infant mortality rate in Afghanistan before 2011, or I'm sorry, before 2000, was the worst in the world. I mean, like if you were a child born in Afghanistan, you only had like a 10%, and I don't remember the exact numbers, but it was astonishing that you only had like a very small percentage chance of living to your 4th birthday.
Right.
But since the United States has been there, I think they've moved up to 5th from the bottom, which is still appalling. But, in my mind, to the guy that was there on the ground chewing dirt, that's my little piece of, hey, we did do some good, despite what we saw, what we did, what we may have thought should have happened, and what really happened.
Yeah.
I think that for me is a little win that we can take away.
Yeah, I agree. Being at the bottom of the barrel to jumping up 5 spots on the list, in what amounts to about 20 years, that's actually a pretty big jump over. I mean, 20 years in the grand scheme of things for something like that. 20 years is a small time period.
Right.
So, I mean, that's a pretty big. I agree. That's definitely a positive takeaway from that. I never set boots on the ground in Afghanistan. I did 2 deployments in Iraq, and I know they're 2 totally different places, but at the same time, they're really not. It's like you said, the time difference is about 2,000 years.
Yeah, I did 2 tours of Afghanistan, and I can say it was 2 completely different wars. I mean, they were in 2 different areas the times I went, so maybe that can be partly attributed to the difference I saw. But for the most part, I think American policy had changed so much, because the first time I went to Afghanistan, it was, I could lift a grid square off the face of the planet with 1 radio transmission.
Right.
And there was no questions asked. By the second time I went, you were given harsh words and threatening language to defend yourself. I mean, heaven forbid you actually had to engage somebody shooting at you because that was your career.
Yeah.
And my lieutenants would come to me and they'd be like, "Sir, you know, what happened to this? You know, bias for action, lead from the front, you know, follow me kind of mentality." And all I could tell them is, "Dude, you're 7 years too late."
Yeah.
I mean, you know, the American policy and how we manage the war has changed dramatically as well. And I think that's why, especially, you know, like I keep going back to the title of the movie, Combat Obscura. You know, it is obscure. You know, I mean, I'm still trying to figure it out. I'm left here scratching my head like, man, what do I tell people when they ask me, you know, what are my thoughts on Afghanistan? You know, I mean, I want to be supportive. Like, yeah, we're fighting a good fight, but I mean, results speak louder than anything else. And besides the infant mortality rate, I don't know what to reference. And maybe one of the listeners can shoot me an email and say, hey, you know what, this is what's going on, and I'd be very grateful. But,
and you know, the other things that were depicted in the film, like one of the Marines basically waiting in an ambush, some Afghani children riding up on donkeys, and he basically ambushes them with his pistol drawn, and you know, is interrogating them just like he would an enemy insurgent. You know, he's, you know, Get the hell down off the donkey. Get the fuck down off the donkey. What are you carrying? What's in this bag? What's in this bag? Get it. What are you looking at? Where are you looking at? Where are you going? Where's Taliban? Tell me about the Taliban.
Mm-hmm.
Waving a pistol
around and yeah, that gave me some heartburn too. And then, you know, he's like, "Oh, here's some chocolate." Yeah, and the scene did like, you know, it was aggravating, and I can't even say I get it, but I mean, part of me is like, yeah. You know, it's like if you've ever had a bad run-in with a law enforcement officer, you know, like, okay, yeah, this guy was being bodacious, maybe belligerent, overbearing. It happens, but that doesn't mean all law enforcement officers are bad. You know, I mean, same thing, you know, this Marine. Yeah. I mean, if that was a Marine, yeah, I would have had his ass.
Oh, yeah.
But, that was an unnecessary call. You know, first thought in my mind was, man, what a fucking asshole.
Yeah.
Sorry. But you know what I'm saying.
And you know, the thing is, and since I started researching this, you know, I've kind of had to dig back in my brain housing group about things. There was one scene in the film where a shopkeeper was taken out by a sniper team, and the footage picks up during the aftermath of it. You know, the shopkeeper has already been shot and killed. They're standing around his body, and you know, they flip his body over, and they're making light of the whole situation. And you know, I've been out of the service for a while. My last deployment was in 2008, so my last deployment was 11 years ago. And like I said, I really had to dig back into my brain housing group and bring forward, you know, looking at it as somebody who's never served, and they see how the Marines are treating the corpse of this shopkeeper. They're looking at it as, oh my God, these guys are sadistic. I mean, they're making jokes about everything. But then, like I said, I had to dig back.
There was two instances like that, and one of them, the one you referenced, where they killed the guy they thought he had a gun, and then the other one where they raid a funeral, and they're you know, like, you know, doing the retina scans and fingerprints of all the guys that have black turbans or whatever they call them on.
Yeah.
And in both of those cases, that's exactly what we're doing wrong. You know, I mean, because if you go to a funeral in the United States, you know, it is not uncommon to wear black.
Yeah.
And it just so happens that the enemy team is wearing black too. So you know, when you show up to a funeral and you say, you know, I mean, they definitely could have used a little more discretion in that mission. And even afterwards, you can hear their frustration. Oh, we think it was a Taliban meeting. No, dude, it really was a funeral.
Yeah.
But you know, and I like to put the shoe on the other foot. Like if that had happened here in the United States, people would riot.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it would be like you know, hey, the guy that owns your local grocery store, you know, was murdered in front of his shop. You know, people would be up in arms, and that's exactly what we're doing wrong. Is you know, we're not locating the right bad guys, you know,
right.
or the bad guys, period. You know, we're killing the people we're supposed to be there to defend and protect. And that's kind of the, you know, problem we've had here in the United States with law enforcement is, you know, I mean, they take the smallest thing, like hey, you know, they shot this kid that had a BB gun, thinking it was a real gun, and you know, whole community rally around it and make it a big issue, and then you know, now, you know, law enforcement are vilifying. You know, law enforcement are the bad guys. They're doing a very difficult job. Service members over there, they're doing a very difficult job. On targets that, man, I wasn't 100% sure. But you know, I told my boss afterward, I was like, I don't know if I did the right thing or not. And he's like, you know, in any given situation, you're not wrong because, you know, X, Y, and Z. But that doesn't alleviate my conscience.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Well,
that you know, whoever pulled the trigger on that shopkeeper, he's got to live with that for the rest of his life.
Right.
You know, and even you know, the family of that shopkeeper. You know, I'm sure he had family members that cared and loved him very much. You know, they're not going to soon forget what, you know, the projection of American power did to them and their family.
Right. And you know, like I said, I had to dig back and really think back on my training when we were getting ready to deploy overseas, and it popped in my head, and now I'll never forget again what one of my platoon sergeants told me. It's, you know, if we're walking down the street and you see a 12-year-old boy holding an AK-47, that's commonplace over there. They carry AK-47s over there like we carry umbrellas over here. But the second you see that boy,
are you afraid of rain?
But he said, you know, the second you see that boy take that weapon off his shoulder, chamber around, and point it at your patrol, he is no longer a 12-year-old boy. He is now a target. He is an enemy combatant. They train us to be. They desensitize us to.
Well, it's black or white. You're either a combatant or a non-combatant.
Yeah.
You can be a non-combatant until you are no longer. You know.
Yeah.
And then there's only one option for the Marine, who's you know, whose job it is to go there, locate, close with, and destroy. And that goes back to, you know, earlier I had mentioned, you know, what is our mission there? Oh, well, we're here to build a nation. No, it's not. That's not what we're designed to do. We're not engineers. We're not medical professionals. I mean, there are medical professionals within our ranks, but that's not. I can't remember it's DIME, D-I-M-E is the acronym, and it talks about how to deal with like foreign relations. DIME being D, diplomacy. I can't remember. Crap! I should have written this down earlier. But N being military and E being economic.
I think I is infrastructure, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, excellent! Yeah. So yeah. I mean, we are the M in DIME, and the military has been refined so many times, you know, over the years, especially since Afghanistan, to do so much more than just military. You know, so you know, when was the last time there was major policy changes about how they do diplomacy, how they do infrastructure, how they do, you know, another economy? You know, I mean, they're still dealing in poppies in Afghanistan. You know, why haven't we found, you know, another, you know, bumper crop, you know, like saffron or something that, you know, they can use to bolster, all of the other letters in DIME besides military. I mean, we framed the Afghan National Army, the Afghan Border Police, and the ANSF as a whole ad nauseum. But that's only one pillar. I mean, it's like a four-legged table, and you've got this one great big leg, and the other three are puny little sticks, and they're like, hey, how come the table wobbles?
Right.
And it's clear.
Yeah. Now I'm going to get to this next paragraph in the statement from PAO. Had the chain of command or military officials had the opportunity to review all the content captured by then Lance Corporal Legoz, both during and after this deployment, some of it would not have been released and would have been turned over to NCIS as evidence for criminal investigations. Obviously, any such alleged criminal activity or misconduct is not what we expect of our Marines, and had officials known about these activities in 2011 to 2012, they would have been thoroughly investigated. Now, I was reading a statement in the press release kit for the film from the production company, and I'm trying to get back to it right now. But it was basically a representative of the Marine Corps had made the statement that the Marine Corps' position is that Legoz did not submit all of the footage for review. Basically, and I'm going to guess that the footage that was not submitted for review probably is the footage that depicted the Marines smoking the marijuana and partaking in activities that could have been construed as violation of Geneva Convention. Who knows? But that is...
and also the Marine that received the gunshot wound to the head. I think that and that to me was the hardest part to watch, but I think it is the realest part of that entire movie. And I've experienced it. And if I may tell a little story, and it kind of goes back to me enlisting in the Marine Corps and not any other branch. I was 17. My mom said, if you join any branch of the service before the age of 18, it will be the Marine Corps. Otherwise, you do it on your own. Because I had to have her permission at the age of 17. And I kind of scratched my head, but she told me that it was because she wanted to make sure that I came home, good or bad. If something happened to me, that I would be brought home. And I'm not trying to get off on too much of a tangent here, but so the helicopter comes and it flies away before they've recovered the casualty because of small arms fire or whatever, and the Miles Bagazi, or I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing his name right, but in an interview he actually contacted the mother of that Marine and said, hey, you know what, I've got this footage. I'm not really, he wasn't even going to put it in the movie, and kind of part of me is glad he did, because it tells the conflict, because Marines, you never leave a Marine behind. That's drilled into you from day one.
Right.
If somebody drops a plastic cup in the chow hall at recruit training, whoever drops it, their job is to jump on it, because it's like dropping a grenade, right? Because you take care of those around you. That is inbred, or that is imbued into our culture. And then to see the helicopter, doing several touch and goes, trying to get in to be safe, protect themselves, so they can pick up your casualty. So during an operation, and there was actually a documentary that was being filmed about the same time. So we're doing an operation in Afghanistan, and we're monitoring our sister unit, an Army unit to our left. we're monitoring their frequencies, and it comes across the river. One of their guys has been separated from the patrol, and they suspect that he's KIA. And the response from the Army COC was, "We'll call for fire on his last suspected position." So their answer was, "Hey, we're going to blow up the body." And my jaw hits the floor, and I go to my boss. I'm like, "Boss, hey, this is what's going on. I'm gonna go recover him." And he said, "I'm not gonna tell you not to." So I grabbed my interpreter, my radio operator, and my squad of Afghans, and we went to the grid coordinates that they had called for fire on that night. And there was no evidence of any remains where they called for fire. I mean, it was clear that some 155s had hit the area, but we so I'm kind of surveying the area, and I see we're in the high mountains, and so trees aren't really tall; they're more like shrubs. And I see this lone little shrub and something next to it, and I'm like, "Hey, maybe that's it. Maybe that's him. Maybe that's the Army staff sergeant." And sure enough, it was. And we go up there, and the Taliban had killed him. They had taken his military gear, his blouse, his rifle, and his LPV and all that, and left him in his skivvy shirt and his trousers. They'd taken his boots, but they had crossed his arms and they had closed his eyes, and they'd put him under this one little shelter from the sun. There wasn't a lot, but they respected his corpse more than the people he had deployed with.
Wow.
And that's not a story I like to tell, but that story is true, and I'm not mad at any soldier about that. I'm mad at any unit for that, but it is a cultural thing. The people we were there to fight had more respect for us than we do.
Right.
There were times where we would have meals with the shuras and jurgas and whatever, with the locals, and we would be sitting across the table from other military-aged males, and through my interpreter, one of them had said the most profound thing to me I'd ever heard. And he said that we here at this table, we are men of action. What we should do is join forces with our enemy. He's talking about yours truly, me, and all of my other counterparts. We should join forces with our enemy and defeat the men of talk. He's talking about the politicians.
Right.
And my interpreter's telling me this, and I'm like, holy crap. And those are the same people we were fighting that night, because anytime there was a full moon, we knew it was game on. But, and that was one of those times. It just goes to show that warriors know their type. They know their like kind. Yeah. They understand it.
And, I'll even go so far as to say, unless you're just a psychopath, nobody likes war. Even those of us who, I was well aware of the fact that we were involved in a war when I graduated high school and I shipped off to boot camp. I was well aware of that fact. And I still volunteered to be in the infantry. But, both times I was deployed, I was scared to death. And I did not, I'm very fortunate, I consider myself very fortunate that I never once had to actually draw my weapon and pull the trigger on anybody. And it just, yeah, I agree with him. We, like you said, they recognize warriors, men of action versus men of talk. And
yeah, we recognize our own, but we also eat our young, and I think that's kind of where the movie is kind of leaves off. Is that these are young Marines. They're doing what Marines do. I mean, drugs in war zones is nothing new. Look at Vietnam. Drug. My stepdad is a Vietnam vet, and he told me about. He would see drug use was a common thing. Does that make you mentally ready to conduct violence? No. But for somebody that has or does conduct violence on a regular basis, that may be something that they need to medicate with. Why do you need a beer after work? That'll take the edge off. It doesn't make you less of a human being. It doesn't make you less of a warrior. It makes you human. And I think the human aspect is what the movie really kind of is in tune with. And maybe that's what the Marine Corps, in their official statement, have a problem with, is that, Marines are supposed to be above reproach, but we're humans, we're fallible. Nobody's perfect.
Right. And it's funny that you brought that up. I'm gonna go on a little rabbit trail here for a second. My father was a former Marine and Vietnam veteran himself. And I'll never forget, in my 11th grade history class, we were discussing the Vietnam War, and my father agreed to come in and speak to our class about it. And I'd heard some of his stories from Vietnam before, but I will never forget one of the first things he said when he sat down and started talking to us was, I know at least one of you is going to ask this question, so I'm going to get it out of the way right now. Yes, I did try a marijuana cigarette. Those were his exact words. I did try a marijuana cigarette.
It sounds like me at MEPS. Yes, I did experiment one time with a marijuana cigarette in case it comes out.
but I did not inhale. No, he didn't say it. No,
man, he should run for president. It's fortunate past. I'm just saying.
Yeah, those were his exact words. I did try a marijuana cigarette. I did not like the way it made me feel. And my father was an admin personnel. He was an 0181 was his MOS. When he stepped off the plane in Da Nang, his platoon commander handed him an M60, said, "This is your A-gunner. This is what you're going to be doing while you're here." He went from pushing papers and everything to he was knee deep in the shit, and this was in the middle of the Tet Offensive. He got the country about 2 months before the Tet Offensive took place.
Yeah, I've had the privilege of serving with members from other branches of the service, and what I've learned is that the Marine Corps doesn't care what they've trained you to do. You are a rifleman, or you are whatever fill in the blank that they need at that time and moment. And Marines are okay with that, it's like, put me in the game, coach,
right.
I don't care what position. And I think that's what makes the Marine Corps unique. This is my opinion, but
yeah. Now the position the Marine Corps is taking right now, as I already said, they're not pursuing any legal action against the Marines in the video or Miles Lagos at this time, but the position that they're taking is, this film could very well be property of the U.S. government based on the fact that he could very well have used government equipment, his government issued camera and everything to shoot this footage.
That would be an embarrassment for the Marine Corps to go that route, because they're saying, yes, this is true. They're lending credibility to it. They're like, yeah, he used our stuff without our permission, but the real question is, so what about what he filmed is wrong? And that's why, initially I said, what Miles portrays is the truth. And anytime you argue against the truth, you run a huge risk. You know, like okay, what's really your agenda? What's really behind what you're trying to tell me? I mean, why is this different than the narrative that you've been feeding the media and the American people? I mean, because the American people, I understand, you know, classifications and security, national security, and keeping things, sources or whatever, secure. But whenever it's, hey, you know, it's just a bunch of Marines doing Marine stuff. Yeah, well, how is that now all of a sudden, you know, something worth taking legal action against?
Right. And like I said, the Marine Corps position is, while we contend that at least some of the content of the film produced with Marine Corps equipment during a Marine Corps deployment and not cleared for public release by any official release authority is rightly the property of the U.S. government, we do not plan to pursue any legal action against Mr. Lagos at this time.
Yeah, I mean, you know, he and I see a lot of similarities between myself and Miles. Like so, you know, I own 2A training group. You know, I teach people how to shoot. I wasn't born knowing how to shoot. The Marine Corps taught me that. So in similar fashion, you know, I'm using what the Marine Corps gave me to try to educate and train other people. So I kind of applaud him for what he's done. At the same time, I realize that to the person who has never served in uniform, you know, or known anybody closely that has, this movie may be like a bunch of, like, you know, random shots where it's just like, okay, that's, you know, maybe it's weird and it doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
But I don't think he made it for everybody else. I think he made it for himself, because that was his experience of war.
Right.
And that and it was true, you know, it wasn't, you know, there's no spin on it, you know, there's no left or right spin. It's straight down the middle fastball. And if you can connect with it, great, you know, home run. The chances are, you know, a lot of people will swing and they're going to miss.
Right. Now I'm going to jump down to the last portion of this statement. It says, Marines deployed in the service of this country should be focused on their mission, the safety of their units, the correct and proper use of U.S. government equipment, and not their personal ambitions. The Marine Corps believes that such distractions from the mission can be extremely dangerous and anathema to the Marine Corps ethos that puts service to unit, corps, and country above our personal interests. All Marines are affected by combat differently, each with their own unique experience, and we recognize that many deal with their own personal scars. We want the Marines in this documentary to get the help and assistance they and their families deserve to allow them to live well and become quality citizens. If they are unsure where to get that help, we are ready to assist them.
Yeah. You know, that I'm glad they said that, you know, I mean, at least they're leaving on the high ground, but, you know, I don't think the Marine Corps is equipped to provide service after somebody leaves active duty. I mean, and really that's what the VA was designed for. The second largest government organization in the United States is the VA after the DOD.
Right.
So taking care of veterans is absolutely, I think, you know, kind of the main theme in that last statement. And I applaud that. I do.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, like we've said numerous times already, you've been to both of them, Iraq and Afghanistan. I've been to Iraq.
No. I've only been to Afghanistan.
Oh, I'm sorry. I misunderstood. I thought I heard you say you'd been to Iraq. You've been to Afghanistan. I've been to Iraq. Two totally different areas, two totally different wars, but we both have similar scars from it. My father, until I joined the Marine Corps, my father never talked about his experiences overseas. Again, with the exception of a couple of lighthearted stories, like when they were leaving to come back and the C-130 they boarded, the runway ended on the edge of a cliff, about a 50-foot drop into the ocean. And one of the engines on the C-130 blew up right as they were getting ready to take off, and they put them on a bus, carried them into town overnight, brought them back out, boarded them on the exact same C-130. And, you know, stories like that, but he never really shared any of his real experiences until after I joined the service. And then by that point, I was able to understand why. Because stuff like that is extremely difficult to talk about with somebody who, as you put it, if you haven't walked a mile in their shoes, then you're just not going to understand.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. You know, I mean, what makes somebody a good decision maker? It isn't necessarily their you know, the number of decisions they made, but somebody who's got more experience has more data points. You know, if you're trying to explain something to somebody that has no data points, nothing to reference, you know, it's very difficult to make the point across, and that's, yeah, I get that. You know, I mean, from your dad, even my own, you know, day to day, you know, yeah. And then you spend more time trying to, you know, get them caught up on what it is you mean by X, Y, or Z.
Right.
Than on what the point of the story was.
Right. We're gonna have to we'll have to cut it off right there. We're running out of time. So don't forget to go on Facebook, follow and like the page, Two Beards Talking. And again, Rod, I want to thank you for coming on, talking with us. I know this has been more of a somber and difficult topic than things we've talked about in the past. So again, thanks for coming on.
No, I enjoyed it very much. Thank you for having me on the show. And like earlier, you know, you wish the best to Matt. I too wish the best for Matt in his future endeavors, and I wish him the best of luck in taking care of what he needs to take care of. And yeah, I hope you invite me back to the show sometime.
Absolutely. So thanks for tuning in, guys. We really appreciate it. Big shout out to the troops out there. This has been Two Beards Talking. I'm Daniel Sanders. With me is Rod Burks. Thanks for listening, guys.